good evening, and welcome to Cozy Sleep Time. Before we begin tonight's story, take a quiet moment to settle in and get comfortable. Find a position where your body can fully relax, whether you're lying in bed, resting on a couch, or simply unwinding after a long day. Allow your shoulders to soften. Let your breathing slow down just a little. There is nowhere else you need to be, and nothing else you need to do. Here, on Cozy Sleep Time, we explore calm and gentle topics, stories designed to help the mind slow down and drift peacefully toward rest. Each story moves slowly, gently, allowing your thoughts to wander and your body to relax, more and more. Our story tonight is about desert nights. As the story unfolds, you can simply listen, or you can allow your mind to drift. There is no need to stay focused. If your thoughts wander, that is perfectly natural. So take one more slow breath, get comfortable, and let the quiet story begin. There is a moment in the desert when the sun touches the horizon and everything changes. The harsh light of day softens into shades of orange and crimson and deep purple, spreading across the sky like watercolors bleeding into paper. The heat that has baked the sand and stone for hours begins to release its hold, and the air takes on a quality that is difficult to describe, a gentleness that was absent just minutes before. This is the desert sunset, a daily event that transforms the landscape into something entirely different from the harsh environment it was during the daylight hours. The desert after sunset is a world in transition. The temperatures begin to drop rapidly, often by 30 degrees or more in the first hour after the sun goes down. The sand that was too hot to touch at noon begins to cool, radiating its stored heat upward into the darkening sky. The rocks that held the sun's warmth all day start to release it, creating subtle currents of warm air that rise and dissipate into the cooling night. The desert is shedding the heat of the day, preparing itself for the cold of the night. As the last sliver of sun disappears below the horizon, the colors in the sky deepen and intensify. The orange fades to a deep red, then to purple, then to a rich blue that slowly darkens toward black. This period of twilight in the desert is remarkably brief compared to other environments. With no humidity in the air to scatter the light, the transition from day to night happens quickly, as if a curtain is being drawn across the sky. Within 30 minutes of sunset, the brightest stars begin to appear, and within an hour, the desert sky is filled with more stars than most people have ever seen. The sounds of the desert change dramatically after sunset. During the day, the desert can seem silent, but it is actually filled with the subtle sounds of life, birds calling, insects buzzing, the rustle of lizards scrambling across rocks. As the sun sets, these sounds begin to fade. The daytime creatures retreat to their burrows and shade spots, and a different set of sounds begins to emerge. The first call of a night bird, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft movement of nocturnal animals emerging from their daytime hiding places. The desert night has its own soundtrack, quieter and more subtle than the sounds of the day. The air itself changes after sunset in the desert. During the day, the air is dry and hot, carrying dust and the smell of baked earth. As night falls, the air becomes noticeably cleaner, the dust settling back to the ground as the wind dies down. The smells of the desert change too, the sharp scent of creosote bushes after the heat of the day, the faint sweetness of desert flowers that open only at night, the clean mineral smell of cooling sand and stone. The night air in the desert is some of the cleanest air on Earth, free from the pollution and humidity that affect most other environments. The desert landscape takes on an entirely different character after dark. The features that seemed harsh and unforgiving during the day become softer and more mysterious in the fading light. The dunes that blazed white under the midday sun now glow softly in the twilight, their curves and contours emphasized by the long shadows of evening. The mountains in the distance become dark silhouettes against the sky, their details lost in the gathering darkness. The desert at night is a place of soft edges and gentle shapes, a landscape that invites contemplation rather than demanding survival. This transition from day to night in the desert is one of the most peaceful experiences that nature offers. The gradual cooling of the air, the fading of the light, the change in sounds and smells, all combine to create a sense of calm that is difficult to find anywhere else. The desert after sunset is a reminder that even the harshest environments have moments of beauty and peace, that the end of the day brings rest even to the most demanding landscapes. Sitting in the desert as the sun goes down and the stars come out is an experience that stays with you, a memory of stillness and quiet that you can return to whenever you need to find peace. When the sun sets in the desert, the sand begins a transformation that is both simple and remarkable. The surface of the desert floor, which has been absorbing solar radiation for hours, starts to release its stored heat into the atmosphere. This process of cooling happens much faster in the desert than in other environments because sand has a low specific heat capacity, meaning it heats up quickly and cools down quickly. Within an hour of sunset, the surface temperature of the sand can drop by as much as 50 degrees Fahrenheit, a dramatic change that reshapes the entire environment of the desert night. The cooling of the sand creates fascinating physical effects that are unique to desert environments. As the sand releases its heat, it warms the air immediately above it, causing this air to rise. This creates gentle convection currents that carry the scent of the desert upward, mixing the cool air of the upper atmosphere with the warmer air near the ground. These subtle air movements are what create the characteristic feeling of a desert evening, the sense that the air is moving in gentle patterns that shift and change as the night progresses. The sand itself changes character as it cools. During the day, the sand is loose and dry, each grain moving independently, creating a surface that shifts and slides underfoot. As the temperature drops, the sand becomes slightly more cohesive. The moisture that was driven deep below the surface during the heat of the day begins to rise again through capillary action, drawn upward by the cooling of the surface. This moisture, invisible to the eye, makes the sand slightly firmer and more stable, changing the way it feels to walk on it and the way the wind moves across its surface. The patterns in the sand change after sunset as well. The wind in the desert tends to die down as the sun sets, and the ripples and dunes that were shaped by the daytime winds become still. The surface of the desert becomes a record of the day's winds, frozen in place until the morning breeze begins again. Walking on the cool sand of a desert night, you leave footprints that will remain until the next day's winds come to erase them, a temporary mark on a landscape that is constantly being reshaped by the elements. The cooling of the desert floor affects everything that lives in the desert. Animals that spend the day in burrows below the surface emerge when the sand has cooled enough for them to move safely across it. The sand temperature determines when the nocturnal creatures begin their nightly activities, and different species emerge at different temperatures, creating a sequence of activity that unfolds as the night progresses. The surface of the desert becomes a stage for the nightly drama of survival, hunting, and gathering that has been playing out for millions of years. There is a particular quality to the cool sand of the desert night that is deeply soothing. Sitting on the sand as it loses its daytime warmth, feeling the heat slowly leave the ground beneath you, there is a sense of connection to the natural rhythms of the earth. The sand that was too hot to touch just hours before becomes comfortable, then cool, then cold as the night progresses. This gradual cooling is a reminder of the daily cycle of heat and cold that shapes the desert, a cycle that has been repeating for as long as the desert has existed. The desert floor at night is also a canvas for light. When the moon is bright, the sand reflects its light with surprising intensity, creating a landscape that seems to glow from within. The dunes become waves of silver and shadow, their curves accentuated by the low angle of the moonlight. Even on moonless nights, the starlight is enough to see by, casting just enough illumination to reveal the shapes of the landscape without giving away their details. The cooling sands of the desert night create an environment that is both peaceful and beautiful, a place where the earth itself seems to rest and recover from the heat of the day. The night sky above the desert is one of the most spectacular sights that the natural world has to offer. Far from the lights of cities and towns, with air that is dry and clear, the desert reveals the stars in a way that few other environments can match. On a moonless night in the deep desert, the sky is so filled with stars that it can be difficult to pick out individual constellations. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a river of light, its details so clear that you can see the dust lanes and star clusters that make up our galaxy. The clarity of the desert sky is due to several factors that combine to create perfect viewing conditions. The air in the desert is exceptionally dry, and water vapor in the atmosphere is one of the main sources of light scattering that dims the stars in other environments. The lack of humidity means that more light from the stars reaches the ground, and the stars appear brighter and sharper than they do in more humid climates. The high altitude of many desert regions also contributes to the clarity of the sky, as there is less atmosphere for the starlight to travel through. The absence of light pollution in remote desert areas allows the full range of the night sky to be visible. In most populated areas, the glow of city lights washes out the fainter stars and makes the Milky Way invisible. But in the desert, far from any human settlement, the sky is as dark as it has been for most of human history. The stars appear in their full glory, from the brightest planets to the faintest specks of light that are barely visible to the naked eye. Looking up at the desert sky, you are seeing the universe as our ancestors saw it. A vast and beautiful canopy of light stretching from horizon to horizon. The movement of the stars across the desert sky is a slow and peaceful spectacle. As the earth rotates, the stars appear to move from east to west, tracing arcs across the sky that change with the seasons. In the desert, where there are few trees or buildings to obstruct the view, you can watch this movement unfold across the entire dome of the sky. The constellations rise and set in their ancient patterns, the planets follow their steady paths among the fixed stars, and occasionally a meteor streaks across the darkness, leaving a brief trail of light that fades almost instantly. The desert night sky has been a source of wonder and guidance for as long as humans have lived in these regions. Ancient desert peoples knew the stars intimately, using them to navigate across vast expanses of featureless terrain, to mark the passage of the seasons, and to tell the stories that define their cultures. The stars were the calendar, the compass, and the storybook of desert civilizations, and the knowledge of the sky was passed down from generation to generation. Looking up at the same stars that guided travelers across the Sahara and the Arabian desert, connects us to this long history of human observation and wonder. There is a particular peace that comes from watching the stars in the desert. The vastness of the sky, the slow movement of the celestial bodies, the silence of the night, all combine to create a sense of perspective that is both humbling and comforting. The problems and concerns of daily life seem smaller when you are lying on the cool sand, looking up at a universe that stretches billions of light years in every direction. The stars remind us that we are part of something much larger than ourselves, and there is a deep comfort in that realization. The desert sky changes throughout the night in ways that are subtle but noticeable to those who take the time to watch. The constellations that are overhead at midnight are different from those that appear in the early evening, and the sky that greets the dawn is different from the sky of the middle of the night. The planets move in their own orbits, changing position from night to night and week to week. The moon rises and sets at different times, its phase changing in its monthly cycle. The desert night sky is not a static thing, but a living, changing panorama that rewards those who take the time to watch it. When the sun goes down in the desert, the daytime animals retreat to their shelters, and a completely different group of creatures emerges to take their place. The desert at night is alive with activity, though much of it is hidden from view. The nocturnal animals of the desert have evolved remarkable adaptations that allow them to thrive in the darkness, and their world is rich with sounds, movements, and behaviors that are rarely seen by human visitors. The most famous of the desert's nocturnal animals is the owl, a bird perfectly adapted for hunting in the dark. Owls have exceptional night vision and hearing that is so acute they can locate a mouse moving beneath the sand from 100 feet away. Their feathers are designed for silent flight, with soft edges that muffle the sound of their wings as they swoop down on their prey. The call of an owl in the desert night is one of the most evocative sounds of the wilderness, a haunting hoot that echoes across the dunes and canyon walls. The coyote is another iconic voice of the desert night. These adaptable animals are most active after sunset, and their howls and yips are a common sound in desert regions. Coyotes are highly social animals, and their howling serves to communicate with other members of their pack, to mark their territory, and to coordinate hunting activities. The sound of coyotes calling to each other across the desert at night is both wild and beautiful, a reminder that the desert is still a place of untamed nature. The desert floor at night is crisscrossed by the trails of small animals that spend the day hidden underground. Kangaroo rats, pocket mice, and other small rodents emerge from their burrows when the temperature drops, searching for seeds and plant matter that have been scattered by the wind. These small animals are themselves prey for the owls, snakes, and foxes that hunt the desert night, and their movements are cautious and quick. The sound of tiny feet skittering across the sand is one of the subtle sounds of the desert night, barely audible but always present. Reptiles are also active in the desert night, though they are less common than the mammals and birds. Some species of snakes and lizards have adapted to nocturnal life, using the cover of darkness to hunt and to avoid the extreme heat of the day. The sidewinder rattlesnake moves across the sand in a distinctive sideways motion that leaves a characteristic J-shaped track, hunting for the small rodents that are also active at night. These reptiles move slowly and deliberately, conserving their energy and relying on their senses to locate prey in the darkness. The insects of the desert night create their own soundscape, a subtle background of chirps and buzzes that fills the air. Crickets and katydids are the most common singers, their calls varying in pitch and rhythm depending on the species and the temperature. The rate of a cricket's chirp is actually related to the temperature, and you can estimate the temperature in Fahrenheit by counting the number of chirps in 15 seconds and adding 40. These insect sounds are the foundation of the desert night's acoustic environment, a steady rhythm that underlies all the other sounds of the darkness. Bats are among the most numerous nocturnal animals in many desert regions. These flying mammals emerge from caves and crevices at dusk, using echolocation to navigate and to find their insect prey. The desert sky at twilight can be filled with bats, their erratic flight patterns creating a dance of movement against the fading light. Bats are remarkably efficient hunters, consuming thousands of insects each night, and they play a crucial role in controlling insect populations in desert ecosystems. The desert night is also home to animals that are rarely seen but whose presence can be felt. The mountain lion moves silently through the rocky areas, hunting deer and other large prey. The bobcat stalks rabbits and rodents along the edges of washes and canyons. The badger digs for ground squirrels and other burrowing animals, leaving large holes in the desert floor that become shelters for other creatures. These larger predators are the ghosts of the desert night, present but invisible, their tracks in the sand the only evidence of their passage. The wind in the desert is a constant presence, but it changes character completely after the sun goes down. During the day, the desert wind can be harsh and abrasive, carrying sand and dust that scour the landscape and make the air feel sharp and uncomfortable. But at night, the wind softens and becomes something else entirely, a gentle movement of air that carries the coolness of the evening and the subtle sounds of the desert into the darkness. The sound of wind moving across sand is unlike any other sound in nature. When the wind blows across the surface of a dune, it creates a series of complex acoustic effects that scientists are still working to understand. The sand grains vibrate against each other as they are moved by the wind, creating a low humming or singing sound that can be heard from a considerable distance. This phenomenon, known as singing sand or booming dunes, occurs in certain desert regions where the sand grains are particularly uniform in size and shape. The sound is deep and resonant, like the drone of a cello or the hum of a large bell, and it rises and falls with the strength of the wind. The wind shapes the desert landscape more than any other force, and the effects of this shaping are most evident at night when the cooler air moves across the dunes. During the night, the wind patterns in the desert are different from those of the day because the temperature gradient between the desert floor and the upper atmosphere is reversed. During the day, the hot ground heats the air above it, creating rising currents and turbulent winds. At night, the cool ground cools the air above it, creating stable conditions and gentle, laminar airflow. This means that the night wind in the desert is smoother and more predictable than the daytime wind, flowing across the dunes in steady patterns that gradually reshape the landscape. The movement of sand by the night wind creates a sound that is soft and continuous, like the whisper of fabric or the gentle rustle of leaves. This sound is barely audible, but it forms a constant background to the desert night, a subtle presence that you become aware of only when you stop and listen. The wind carries the finest grains of sand in suspension, creating a thin haze of dust that glows in the moonlight. Larger grains are pushed along the surface in a process called saltation, where they bounce and skip across the sand, creating a soft tapping sound that adds to the nighttime soundscape. The wind at night also carries sounds from great distances across the desert. In the still, cool air of the desert night, sound travels much farther than it does during the heat of the day. The howl of a coyote from miles away can sound like it is just over the next dune. The call of a night bird from a distant canyon can be heard with surprising clarity. The sound of a vehicle on a remote road can carry for 20 miles or more, a low hum that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The desert night amplifies and carries sound in a way that is both beautiful and disorienting. The wind in the desert night also carries the scent of distant places, the smell of rain falling on dry ground from a storm that is miles away, the fragrance of desert flowers blooming in a distant wash, the clean smell of dry rock and sand. These scents travel on the night wind, bringing information about the desert that would be invisible to the eyes. The nose becomes a way of seeing in the desert night, and the wind becomes a messenger that connects all parts of the desert into a single living system. Sitting in the desert and listening to the wind at night is one of the most peaceful experiences that the natural world has to offer. The gentle movement of air, the soft sounds of sand shifting, the distant calls of animals, the subtle scents carried from far away, all combine to create a sensory experience that is both calming and invigorating. The wind of the desert night is a reminder that even in the most seemingly empty places, there is constant movement and change, a living system that operates on timescales and patterns that are different from our own. The relationship between humans and the desert night is as old as humanity itself. Some of the earliest human civilizations developed in desert regions, and the night sky was an essential part of their lives. The ancient Egyptians, who lived along the edge of the Sahara Desert, were among the most accomplished astronomers of the ancient world. They used the stars to align their pyramids, to predict the flooding of the Nile, and to create a calendar that divided the year into seasons. The desert night sky was their clock and their calendar, and their observations of the stars were remarkably accurate, given that they had no telescopes or other instruments. The Bedouin people of the Arabian desert have a culture that is deeply connected to the night. For centuries, they traveled across the desert under the stars, using their knowledge of the constellations to navigate between water sources and trading centers. The Bedouin developed an intimate knowledge of the night sky, giving names to individual stars and groups of stars that were different from the Western constellations. Their poetry and stories are filled with references to the stars in the night, and the desert night is central to their cultural identity. The Tuareg people of the Sahara Desert have a similar relationship with the night. Known as the Blue People because of the indigo dye in their clothing, the Tuareg have been traveling across the Sahara for more than 1,000 years. Their knowledge of the desert night includes not only the stars, but also the behavior of animals, the patterns of the wind, and the feel of the sand underfoot. The night is when the Tuareg traditionally travel, moving across the desert while the temperatures are cool and the stars guide their way. The Native American peoples of the southwestern deserts also have a deep connection to the night sky. The Pueblo people built their villages with careful attention to the positions of the sun and stars, and their ceremonies often took place at night. The Navajo people tell stories about the stars and the constellations that explain how the universe was created and how people should live. The night sky is a source of guidance, inspiration, and spiritual meaning for these desert peoples, and their cultures reflect the rhythms of the desert night. Ancient trade routes crossed the world's deserts, and these routes were traveled primarily at night. The Silk Road, which connected China to the Mediterranean, crossed the vast deserts of Central Asia. Caravans of camels and merchants would travel through the night, stopping during the heat of the day to rest and to care for their animals. The night travel allowed them to cover more ground while avoiding the extreme temperatures of the desert day, and the stars provided the only reliable navigation across the featureless landscape. The history of desert exploration is filled with stories of people who found their way by the stars. Early European explorers of the Sahara and the Arabian Desert relied on local guides who knew the stars intimately. These guides could navigate by a single star on a cloudy night or read the direction of the wind from the shape of the dunes. Their knowledge was passed down through generations, a living tradition of desert navigation that is still practiced today by traditional desert peoples. The desert night has also been a source of spiritual inspiration for countless people throughout history. The hermits and monks who retreated to the desert to live in solitude chose the desert not despite its harshness, but because of it. The emptiness of the desert, the clarity of the night sky, the profound silence, all created conditions that were conducive to meditation and contemplation. The desert night has been a place of spiritual seeking for thousands of years, from the early Christian hermits of the Egyptian desert to the Sufi mystics of the Arabian Peninsula. There is something about the desert night that turns the mind inward and opens the heart to wonder. Desert plants have evolved remarkable strategies for surviving in one of the harshest environments on Earth, and many of their most important adaptations are tied to the night. The extreme heat and intense sunlight of the desert day make it difficult for plants to carry out their basic functions without losing precious water. For this reason, many desert plants have shifted their most important activities to the night, when temperatures are lower and the air is more humid. One of the most remarkable adaptations of desert plants is a type of photosynthesis called crassulation acid metabolism, or CAM photosynthesis. Most plants open their stomata, the tiny pores on their leaves, during the day to take in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. But this also allows water to escape, which would be fatal in the desert. CAM plants, including cacti, agaves, and many succulents, have evolved to open their stomata at night instead. They take in carbon dioxide during the cool night hours and store it as malic acid, then use it for photosynthesis during the day without opening their stomata. This adaptation allows them to reduce water loss by as much as 90% compared to regular plants. The saguaro cactus, one of the most iconic plants of the Sonoran Desert, is a master of nighttime adaptation. Its shallow root system spreads out in a wide circle just below the surface of the soil, ready to absorb any moisture that comes its way. At night, when the humidity rises and temperatures drop, the saguaro opens its stomata and takes in carbon dioxide. Its accordion-like pleats allow it to expand as it stores water from occasional rains, and the wax coating on its surface prevents water loss. The saguaro grows incredibly slowly, adding only about an inch per year in its first decade, but it can live for 200 years or more. Many desert plants produce flowers that bloom only at night, a strategy that helps them conserve water and attract nocturnal pollinators. The night-blooming cereus is perhaps the most famous of these, a cactus that produces large, fragrant white flowers that open only after dark and wilt before dawn. The flowers are pollinated by moths and bats that are active at night, and the sweet fragrance of the blossoms fills the desert air. The blooming of the night-blooming cereus is an event that desert dwellers look forward to, a brief and beautiful display that lasts for only a single night. The creosote bush, one of the most common plants in North American deserts, also takes advantage of the night. After a rainfall, the creosote bush releases a distinctive fragrance that is most noticeable in the cool evening air. This smell, which many people associate with the desert after rain, is caused by volatile compounds that the plant releases. The creosote bush is one of the oldest living organisms on Earth, with some clonal colonies estimated to be more than 11,000 years old. Its ability to survive through extreme heat and drought is due in large part to its nighttime adaptations. Desert grasses and small plants also make use of the night. Many desert annuals germinate and grow during the cooler months, taking advantage of winter rains and the milder temperatures of the desert night. These plants complete their entire life cycle in a matter of weeks, growing, flowering, and producing seeds before the heat of summer returns. The seeds of many desert plants can lie dormant in the soil for years, waiting for the right combination of temperature and moisture to trigger germination. The relationship between desert plants and the night goes beyond mere survival. The nightly cooling allows plants to recover from the stress of the day, to repair damage caused by ultraviolet radiation, and to prepare for the next day's heat. The dew that forms on plant surfaces during the night provides a source of moisture that can be absorbed directly through the leaves. The night is a time of recovery and renewal for desert plants, a daily respite from the challenges of life in one of the most demanding environments on Earth. Observing desert plants at night reveals a world of activity that is hidden during the day. The flowers that open only after dark, the subtle movements of leaves and stems as they respond to the cooling air, the gathering of moisture on every surface, all of these are part of the nightly rhythm of desert plant life. The desert plants that seem so still and dormant during the day are actually engaged in a constant dance of adaptation and survival, and the night is when much of this dance takes place. The silence of the desert at night is different from any other silence on Earth. It is not the absence of sound, but rather the absence of the constant background noise that fills most other environments. In the desert at night, the silence is deep and complete, a quality that can be almost overwhelming to someone who is not accustomed to it. This silence is one of the most precious and rare experiences that the natural world offers, and it is becoming increasingly difficult to find in our modern world. The depth of the silence in the desert night is due to several factors. The lack of vegetation means there are no leaves to rustle in the wind, no branches to creak, no trees to filter the breeze into sound. The sand itself absorbs sound rather than reflecting it, deadening footsteps and voices, and making the desert one of the quietest places on Earth. The dry air carries sound differently than humid air, and the lack of water vapor means that sounds do not carry as far or as clearly as they do in more humid environments. All of these factors combine to create a silence that is almost absolute. This silence has a physical quality to it. When you sit in the desert at night and the wind dies down and the animals fall silent, the absence of sound becomes a presence in itself. You can feel the silence pressing against your ears, a gentle pressure that is both calming and slightly disorienting. Your own breathing becomes loud in your ears. Your heartbeat seems to echo in your chest, and the small sounds that you normally ignore become prominent. The silence of the desert forces you to become aware of your own existence in a way that is difficult to achieve in noisier environments. The silence of the desert night has been recognized as a valuable resource for mental and emotional health. In a world that is filled with constant noise, from traffic and machinery to electronic devices and background music, the opportunity to experience true silence has become rare. The desert offers this silence in abundance, and many people who visit the desert find that the silence is one of the most memorable and beneficial aspects of their experience. The quiet allows the mind to rest, to process thoughts without distraction, and to find a sense of peace that is difficult to achieve in noisier environments. Scientists who study the effects of silence on the brain have found that quiet periods can reduce stress, lower blood pressure, and improve cognitive function. The silence of the desert night provides an ideal environment for this kind of mental restoration. Without the constant input of sound, the brain can shift into a different mode of processing, one that is more reflective and less reactive. The silence allows the mind to wander, to make connections, and to find solutions to problems that seemed intractable in noisier environments. The silence of the desert is also important for the animals that live there. Many desert animals rely on their hearing to detect predators and prey, and the natural quiet of the desert allows them to hear the subtle sounds that mean the difference between life and death. A kangaroo rat can hear the wing beats of an approaching owl from a considerable distance, and a coyote can hear the movement of a mouse beneath the sand. The silence is an essential part of the desert ecosystem, and the introduction of human-caused noise can disrupt the delicate balance of predator and prey. There is a particular quality to the silence of the desert at night that changes as the night progresses. In the early evening, the silence is tempered by the sounds of animals emerging from their daytime shelters and the last calls of birds settling in for the night. As the night deepens, these sounds fade and the silence becomes more complete. In the hours just before dawn, the silence reaches its peak, a stillness that seems to hold its breath in anticipation of the coming day. This changing quality of silence is one of the subtle rhythms of the desert night, a pattern that reveals itself to those who take the time to listen to the absence of sound. Water is the most precious resource in the desert, and the places where it rises to the surface are among the most beautiful and important features of the desert landscape. An oasis in the desert night is a place of profound peace, where the sound of water and the rustle of palm fronds create a gentle music that contrasts with the silence of the surrounding sands. The presence of water transforms the desert, creating pockets of life and green that stand out against the brown and gold of the arid landscape. Oases form where underground water sources rise to the surface, often along fault lines or in areas where the water table is close to the surface. These water sources can be fed by rainfall that fell hundreds of miles away and traveled underground for decades or even centuries before emerging in the desert. The water that surfaces at an oasis may have fallen as rain in distant mountains and traveled through layers of rock and sand for hundreds of years before reaching this place. There is something deeply calming about this ancient water, which has been moving slowly through the darkness of the earth for so long before finally emerging into the light of the desert night. The sound of water in the desert at night is particularly beautiful because it is so rare. The gentle trickle of a spring, the soft splash of water falling into a pool, the quiet murmur of a stream making its way across the desert floor, these sounds carry an unusual clarity and sweetness in the dry desert air. The water seems to amplify the silence around it, creating a bubble of sound that defines the oasis as a separate space within the larger desert landscape. Listening to water in the desert at night is an experience that engages the senses in a way that is both calming and deeply satisfying. The vegetation that grows around desert oases creates a microclimate that is noticeably different from the surrounding desert. The shade of palm trees and the moisture from the water create an area where the temperature is cooler and the air is more humid. This microclimate attracts a wide variety of animals, from insects and birds to larger mammals that come to drink. An oasis in the desert night is a hub of activity, a gathering place for the creatures of the desert that would otherwise be scattered across the vast landscape. Moonlight on desert water is one of the most beautiful sights that the natural world has to offer. When the moon is full and the sky is clear, the surface of an oasis pool reflects the moonlight with a silver glow that illuminates the surrounding vegetation. The reflection of the stars in the still water creates the illusion of a second sky below the surface, and the gentle ripples caused by the night breeze scatter the light into 1,000 tiny points of brightness. Sitting beside a pool of water in the desert on a moonlit night is an experience that has inspired poets and travelers for thousands of years. The oases of the desert have been centers of human activity for thousands of years. They provided water for travelers crossing the vast desert expanses, and many of them developed into towns and cities that became important centers of trade and culture. The oasis cities of the Silk Road, such as Samarkand and Bukhara, were legendary for their beauty and prosperity, and they owed their existence entirely to the water that rose from the desert floor. The nightlife of these oasis cities was famous for its music, poetry, and storytelling, and the desert night provided a backdrop for some of the most brilliant cultural achievements of human civilization. There is a particular peace that comes from being near water in the desert at night. The combination of the vast emptiness of the desert and the intimate presence of the water creates a sense of contrast that is both stimulating and calming. The water is a reminder that even in the most barren places, life finds a way, that there is hidden abundance beneath the surface of apparent emptiness. The oasis in the desert night is a symbol of hope and renewal, a place where the traveler can rest and recover before continuing the journey across the sands. There is a particular quality of peace that comes with the desert night that is different from any other environment. The combination of vast open space, profound silence, and the gentle coolness of the air creates conditions that are uniquely conducive to calm and reflection. The desert at night seems to slow time down, to soften the edges of the world, to create a space where the mind can rest in a way that is increasingly rare in modern life. The vastness of the desert contributes to this sense of peace. In the desert, the horizon is far away and the sky is enormous, creating a sense of space that is both humbling and liberating. The problems and concerns that seem so important in the confined spaces of daily life become smaller and more manageable when you are surrounded by the immensity of the desert night. The desert reminds you that the world is larger than your immediate concerns, that there is a wider perspective available if you are willing to step back and look at the bigger picture. The lack of visual clutter in the desert also contributes to its calming effect. In most environments, our eyes are constantly processing information, reading signs, recognizing objects, navigating around obstacles. In the desert at night, there is very little to see beyond the basic shapes of the landscape and the stars above. The eyes can rest, the visual processing centers of the brain can power down, and the mind can turn its attention inward. This reduction of visual input is one of the reasons why the desert night is so restful and restorative. The desert night also provides a rare opportunity for solitude. In most places, it is difficult to be truly alone. There are always other people nearby, the sounds of human activity, the lights of human habitation. In the desert at night, it is possible to be completely alone, to be the only human for miles in any direction. This solitude is not lonely, but liberating, a chance to be with yourself without the constant presence of others. The solitude of the desert night allows you to hear your own thoughts, to feel your own feelings, to simply be yourself without any external demands or distractions. The natural rhythms of the desert night also contribute to its peaceful quality. The slow movement of the stars across the sky, the gradual cooling of the air, the subtle changes in sound as different animals become active and then fall silent. All of these rhythms create a sense of being part of a larger pattern. The desert night has its own tempo, slower and more deliberate than the tempo of human life. When you spend time in the desert at night, you naturally begin to synchronize with this slower rhythm, and the frantic pace of modern life begins to feel less important. There is a reason why people have been drawn to the desert for spiritual and contemplative purposes for thousands of years. The desert strips away the unnecessary and leaves only what is essential. The desert night, in particular, provides an environment where the distractions of the material world are minimized and the inner world becomes more accessible. The peace of the desert night is not an empty peace, but a full one. A peace that comes from the recognition that you are part of something vast and beautiful and ancient. The peace of the desert night stays with you after you leave. The memory of those quiet hours under the stars, the feeling of the cool sand beneath you, the sound of the wind in the darkness, these experiences become a part of you. When the noise and stress of daily life become overwhelming, you can close your eyes and return to the desert night in your memory, drawing on the peace that you found there. The desert night is a gift that keeps giving, a source of calm that you can access whenever you need it. For thousands of years, nomadic peoples have traveled across the world's deserts, and the night has always been their companion. The nomads of the desert developed a relationship with the night that was practical, spiritual, and deeply intimate. The night was when they traveled, when they told their stories, when they taught their children the ways of the desert, and when they connected with the vast universe that stretched above their temporary homes. The Bedouin people of the Arabian desert are perhaps the most famous of the desert nomads. Their traditional way of life involved moving with their herds of goats and camels across the desert, following the patterns of rainfall and vegetation. The Bedouin traveled primarily at night, when the temperatures were cool and the stars provided reliable navigation. A Bedouin guide could read the stars the way a modern person reads a map, identifying individual stars and constellations and using them to navigate across hundreds of miles of featureless desert. The night camp of the Bedouin was a place of warmth and community. After the evening meal, the tribe would gather around the fire, and the storytellers would begin their work. The stories of the Bedouin are filled with tales of heroic journeys, miraculous discoveries, and the wisdom of the desert. These stories were passed down through generations, changing and evolving with each telling, but always maintaining the essential truths that the desert had taught. The night was the time for these stories, and the desert sky was the ceiling of the world's oldest theater. The Tuareg people of the Sahara have a similar tradition of nighttime travel and storytelling. Known as the Blue People for the indigo dye in their clothing, the Tuareg have been crossing the Sahara for more than 1,000 years. Their knowledge of the desert night includes not only the stars, but also the behavior of the wind, the feel of the sand, and the sounds of the animals. The Tuareg can read the desert like a book, and the night is when the most important pages of this book are written. The nomadic peoples of Central Asia including the Mongols and the Kazakhs, also have a deep connection to the desert night. The steppes and deserts of Central Asia are some of the most remote places on Earth, and the people who have lived there have always been closely connected to the sky. The Mongol tradition of throat singing, in which singers produce multiple notes simultaneously, was often performed around the campfire at night, the haunting sounds carrying across the dark desert and blending with the wind. The stories that nomads tell under the desert night sky are different from the stories told in settled communities. They are stories of movement and change, of journeys and discoveries, of the relationship between people and the vast landscapes they travel through. These stories reflect the nomadic understanding that home is not a place, but a way of being, that the journey itself is the destination, and that the desert night is the most beautiful home of all. The night sky provided the nomads with more than just navigation. It was their clock, their calendar, and their source of cosmic orientation. The phases of the moon marked the passage of months, the position of the constellations marked the seasons, and the movement of the planets provided a sense of the larger patterns of the universe. The nomads lived in close connection with these celestial rhythms, and their lives were organized around the movements of the sky. The tradition of storytelling under the desert night sky continues to this day, though it is becoming increasingly rare as nomadic peoples settle in permanent communities. But the memory of those nights under the stars, of the stories told around the fire, of the connection between the people and the sky, remains a powerful part of the cultural heritage of desert peoples. Sitting under the desert night sky, you can still feel the presence of all those who have sat here before you, telling their stories and watching the stars. Sleeping under the desert stars is one of the most profound experiences that the natural world has to offer. There is no ceiling between you and the universe, no walls to block the night air, no artificial lights to dim the stars. You lie on the cool sand with the vastness of the sky spread out above you, and you fall asleep to the gentle sounds of the desert night. This is how humans slept for most of our history, under the open sky, connected to the earth and the stars. Preparing a place to sleep in the desert requires attention to the details that make the difference between a restful night and an uncomfortable one. The sand must be smoothed and cleared of stones and sharp objects. A slight depression can be dug to cradle the body and provide some protection from the wind. The sleeping bag or blanket is laid out on a ground sheet that keeps the moisture of the sand from seeping through. The pillow is positioned so that the head is slightly elevated, allowing a clear view of the sky. These small preparations become a ritual, a way of marking the transition from the activities of the day to the rest of the night. As you lie on the desert floor, the sensations of the night become more vivid. The coolness of the sand against your back is a gentle presence that changes as the night progresses. The air moves across your face, carrying the sense of the desert, the dry smell of sand and stone, the faint sweetness of night-blooming flowers, the clean smell of the open air. The sounds of the night carry clearly in the stillness, the distant call of a coyote, the rustle of a small animal moving through the brush, the whisper of wind across the dunes. These sensations combine to create an experience that engages all the senses in a way that sleeping indoors never can. The first stars appear as the last light of sunset fades from the sky. One by one, they emerge from the deepening blue until the entire sky is filled with points of light. If you lie still and let your eyes adjust to the darkness, you begin to see more and more stars, the fainter ones becoming visible as your pupils dilate. The Milky Way stretches across the sky, a river of ancient light that has been traveling toward you for tens of thousands of years. There are so many stars that it becomes impossible to count them, and the sky takes on a depth and texture that is lost when viewed from under the glare of city lights. The experience of falling asleep under the desert stars is different from falling asleep in a bed. Without the familiar comforts of a room, without the boundaries of walls and ceiling, the mind opens in a different way. The usual patterns of thought that keep you awake begin to loosen and dissolve. The vastness of the sky seems to draw your thoughts upward and outward, spreading them across the universe until they become too diffuse to hold on to. Sleep comes not as a sudden transition, but as a gradual merging with the night, a gentle letting go of consciousness. The night in the desert has its own rhythms that shape the quality of sleep. The temperature continues to drop through the night, reaching its lowest point just before dawn. The body responds to this cooling by deepening into sleep, conserving energy, and allowing the mind to rest more completely. The sounds of the night also change, the animals that were active in the early evening falling silent as the night progresses, and the stillness becoming more complete. In the desert, the deepest sleep comes in the hours just before dawn, when the night is at its coldest and quietest. Waking in the desert at dawn is as beautiful as falling asleep under the stars. The first light appears as a glow on the eastern horizon, gradually brightening and spreading across the sky. The colors of dawn in the desert are subtle and beautiful, pastel shades of pink and orange and lavender that gradually intensify as the sun approaches the horizon. The birds begin to call, the nocturnal animals retreat to their shelters, and the desert begins to warm. The night is over, but the peace of the desert night stays with you, a calm that carries through the day ahead. The experience of sleeping under the desert stars is one of the oldest human experiences, and it connects us to our ancestors who slept under the same sky for hundreds of thousands of years. In the desert night, we are not so different from those who came before us. We still need the comfort of the warm earth beneath us, the beauty of the stars above us, and the peace of the night around us. The desert night offers all of these things in abundance, and those who take the time to lie down on the cool sand and look up at the stars will find a peace that no bed can provide. As our story slowly comes to an end, allow the final thoughts to fade. Gently into the quiet of the night, the rain and the calm ideas and the peaceful moments we've explored can settle softly in the background like distant echoes of a quiet evening. There is no need to think about anything now. Your body can continue to relax, breathing slow and steady. If you are still awake, simply remain here a little longer and enjoy the calm atmosphere. And if sleep has already started to find you, let it arrive naturally and without effort. Thank you for spending this quiet moment here on Cozy Sleep Time. If you enjoy these calm stories and gentle explorations, you can return anytime for another peaceful journey into rest. For now, let the night grow quieter and quieter and quieter, and allow yourself to drift deeper into sleep. Good night.